I'm Chip Hanna, and this is the For You Leaders podcast featuring Kirk Dando. We've studied over 8,000 successful, high-growth leaders. We distill their practices and perspectives down to lessons that you can apply today. We've all been there before. You think you've made a brilliant hire, and they fail miserably. Or you made a hire that maybe you're a little concerned about, didn't know about, and they just took off.
Yeah, Chip, you and I talk about this a lot, and we've talked a lot about this with the CEOs that we've been fortunate enough to work with, is no one ever argues the point that it takes the right person to get the job done. And so obviously hiring and promoting is an art as much as it is a science, but we all would agree, I think, that it can be and is very, very hard. And I think that, statistically speaking, about a third of the time we get it right, and things come together. And about a third of the time, it's okay, and we tolerate it. And about a third of the time, it's just not good. It's just not very good at all. And there's no other area in business where we would tolerate such poor performance as we do in the hiring and promoting of people. A big part of getting that process right really starts at the beginning with the interviewing.
Yeah, Kirk, you're right. Today we continue our conversation with Dirk Elmendorf, one of the co-founders of Rackspace. And if you missed the first episode, please go back and listen to it. Dirk tells the story about Rackspace, how they started it, and how they built a culture of fanatical customer support. It's a really great interview. I encourage you to check it out. And now, we originally reached out to Dirk because we heard about his unique approach to hiring and interviewing potential candidates for positions. It's hard no matter what the role is, but it gets even harder to hire for positions like engineering, where most engineers, may not excel in traditional interviews, but they still could be valuable members of the team.
Yeah, that's a great point. I love how Dirk called that out in our conversations. And it's not just engineering. Some people just sometimes don't have a great capacity to really interview well. I really appreciate his practical advice that you're going to hear today and be able to learn from and apply. He talks about what is more important in hiring and interviewing, gut instinct or data. He shares some specific questions he likes to ask and what he is looking for in his answers. Once again, one of the most powerful parts of interviewing is being able to ask great questions and really listening to the responses.
Yeah, it's a really great episode. Let's just jump right back into your conversation with Dirk, where you asked him about how he interviews.
Everybody thinks they're great at interviewing, and nobody is, myself included. Like, it is a very hard thing to put some people in a room and get a real sense of that person and how they'll do in a job. And my challenge was often that the places I operated in, I was rarely hiring for the job of today. I was almost always looking for a person who's going to do something now, but has to be able to grow into where we go. And so that like looking for that became very important. And so one of the things that I kind of learned at Rackspace and have repeated in my hiring outside is that, when we look at things, people tend to swing hard into, well, it's all gut and judgment, or it's all data, and the truth is in the middle. So my model tends to be trying to find, very concrete, standardized questions you can ask across all of your candidates, so that you make sure you dig into all of them on some level that you can actually compare, and then some judgment in that you find those questions or areas where they want to bring themselves into the room, and then so that you can evaluate how that fits. Because part of what makes interviewing so hard is that interviewing for the person is a separate skill from doing their job. I've definitely had people who are amazing in the interview room and terrible in the chair, and vice versa. And so part of that process is about getting them to reveal, hey, is what we're talking about doing something that is really something you want to do and that you think about, and it's where you want to head, and how do you want to grow as a person or as your career, not just here, but how do you think about where you're going? These are all things that give us a sense. Like when we first started Rackspace, we used to always ask things like, have you ever built a computer from scratch? Have you ever had a problem that kept you up all night? We were trying to get people to tell personal stories about the things that made them passionate about technology because that's what our business was about. Our business was about digging into these little problems that had a big impact on customers. And if you go in pure gut of like, hey, we're doing a podcast with a conversation, that's good. But in an interview, the challenge then is the people who are very capable but very nervous, they don't come out in that style. You need to give them a little more structure so that they can kind of hang off that and kind of get somewhere, and then you can go, oh, this is something they've really lit up on. Let's dig into why is that what gets them out of their shell. And especially I think because I've dealt with so many engineers and technical people who tend to be a little more introverted, you need to give them time to warm up and show off those things they really care about, but they never lead with that. The sales guys, it's easy to get them to go through it. The question is whether they can deliver, but engineers take a lot longer to get them into that place. And so it's more important that you have structure for comparison, but then you dive in as you find things that they light up on. And that's typically what I'm looking for. If I can't find something that the person I'm interviewing is really engaged on, it's kind of a red flag for me. Like you're coming to say, I'm going to deliver value to you in the business. Okay, well, so give me some idea of what that value is and where you fit so that I can figure out how we're going to do more together.
Yeah, the subtle but significant part of what I hear you saying is a lot of times in interviews it feels like they're testing the skill. Do they have the skill? Do they have the technical part of the business, whether it's an executive or someone that's going to be an engineer, accounting, whatever it might be. But really testing for someone's will. What's their passion? What what you said, what lights them up and does those things? Oftentimes, that is either something that's left to like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC or something like that, and we maybe throw some softball questions at them, because we're told these are good questions, but we don't really, like I said, listen very carefully. I think the biggest part of communicating in an interview is listening. What do you have some go-to questions that you like to ask to kind of draw those things out?
I don't know that I have, I guess I probably could have pulled out my old thing. I end up constructing my questions based on what the role we're going to interview on is. But there was a great, I think it was Steve Yagi who wrote, "You want smart people who get things done." And he kind of said, like, if you could just ask them, "Hey, are you smart? Do you get things done?" And they said yes, and that was true, wouldn't the world be a better place? And so there's a lot of times that I end up trying to think about how would somebody prove to me that they could get things done doing this. Could they have done this in the past? Is this the kind of problem they like to solve? Is it something that they have, another interest that overlaps with? And so I'm trying to find questions that proxy for those, driving things, or if, when I think about customer service roles, that is much more about, okay, well, how good are you at being a champion for somebody who isn't being treated fairly? Like, are you just going to say, no, you're the representative of the customer inside the company. How do you champion them? And how do you think about when people don't get a fair deal? Do you think, oh, it's no big deal, you win some, you lose some? Or does that really fill you with a sense of, I need to do something about it? So thinking about what are the kind of core ideals of the job role, and then figuring out, well, what questions can I ask that will help me kind of vet out that those things might match up, because at least it'll give you in the area to discover those things about a person. Because, you don't have forever to decide, hey, this person is worth a second interview or a team interview, or depending on how your process plays out, you need to angle them towards something where you're kind of mining for this gold. Is there gold in there? Or, hey, it just turns out that this isn't the right kind of thing. And every now and then I find candidates who I'm like, you don't seem like the right kind of person for this role, but I hope you will come back because I know this other role that sounds just like what you're trying to do.
One of the questions I like to ask, and it seems like a fairly innocent kind of vanilla question, but I always ask people, go back just after high school and tell me about different educational experiences you might have had. And then just, walk me through kind of your journey that got you kind of where you are today. And it's amazing. I've done this, I've asked literally thousands of people this question over 20 years. And it's amazing the things that you hear. I've heard about people that, for whatever reason had to leave their home at 11, 12, 13 years old, started living on the streets, figured out a way to get themselves through Vanderbilt and get an engineering degree, and now are the presidents of companies. It's just interesting how you hear about their stick-to-itiveness, or kind of the things that you're talking about, or the things that they are passionate about, or what lights them up, or you hear about people that ended up raising their 3 siblings for whatever reason, and you just hear these stories about how people kind of have this high figure it out, or sometimes they don't. So that's been one that I've used that has seemed to serve me pretty well over the years.
David used to have this question that I was always impressed with the discussion it generated, where he would say, there's an old saying that the customer is always right. And then he would ask, what do you think? And after we probably did that 100 times, I'd heard, yeah, they're always right, or they think they're right, or, I heard so many variations. I was kind of like, David, okay, so how do you answer that? You've obviously thought about it. And he was like, for me, it's simple. Once you're wondering who's right, we've already lost. It doesn't matter who's right. What matters is, are we going to take care of them? And I was I was always kind of like, that's why I came to him for guidance, right? Is that once you hear it, you go, yeah, that's obvious. I don't really care if I'm right when I'm having an argument with a waiter about something. I just want the thing fixed. I just want to know that they cared that they're like, oh yeah, let's just sort it out. I don't get points because I pointed out something. I just want to eat.
Yep. No. That's actually a great piece of advice. I'm sure people listening are going to pick up on that for sure. One of the things I wanted to make sure and ask you about, I was on a panel and I cannot remember who it was. I think it was maybe the head of people at Rackspace, but one of the questions came up, and it's something I talk about a lot of times, is any business grows and scales, this need for kind of this a management culture is what I call it, which, is just words. But, that need for people who, you have people that go from, that are kind of have that technical ability that oftentimes get moved into management that aren't really maybe capable or ready yet, or don't really want to do the hard work to really manage and develop people and develop the processes and systems. But nonetheless, it's a critical part as the business gets to scale, because if people really can't manage, then what happens is the work doesn't get done, and then what we end up doing is hiring more people than we need, and your cost structure all out of whack, and then you have layoffs. But the person from Rackspace talked about, we recognized that a long time ago, and what we have is called leadership or management detox. Does that sound familiar?
That may have been later, but I totally I recognize the earlier version of that, and especially because, I'm one of those people you just described. I feel like I am great at setting a direction or handling very complicated problems, but I've worked with really great managers, and I know that that's not where my strengths lie. I always partner with people who are great at management and the care and feeding of people, because for me the product is what drives me, or the project. And we definitely celebrated that distinction, that yeah, you can be a technical person and be great at technical, but management is a different thing. Just because you are a great technician does not make you a great manager, and you don't necessarily have to have been a great technician to be a great manager. I worked with some very non-technical managers who I was really I originally would never have said that. I would have said you had to be great at the tech and then convert. And what I learned was, no, if you actually really care about the people and listen to them, you don't have to defend against as much BS, because the people don't mislead you. They are honest with you.
Exactly. Yeah. Winning that benefit of the doubt. Yeah, it was really interesting, because what she had said was, a lot of people are either inside the business. You guys did celebrate that distinction and honored it in such a way that, even people that came in from the outside that had these pedigrees of great management and great leadership, it was like you would almost put them through this detox to unlearn them from the things that they learned and say, here's what it means at our organization to be successful. And it's not just the technical or tactical side of it, but it was also obviously the cultural side of it. So that's a term I have used in the past, and that's where I picked it up. So I wanted to, one, give credit, but two, I think it's a great concept, and I think it's one that a lot of people can benefit from. One of the things that I always like to, I've been very fortunate to be next to a lot of very successful leaders, and success, needs to be defined, but nonetheless, they're very, very busy people, and they spend a lot of time in their work, and they also spend a lot of time outside of their work with their families and doing other things. Traditionally what's called work-life balance, but I've heard people, name it other things and kind of frame it in different ways. Talk to me a little bit about what that journey has been like for you. No doubt you've had a lot of success. You've seen a lot of growth and the demands that causes on somebody. Are there things that you've learned along the way, lessons that you wish you would have known but you didn't, you learned the hard way, or anything you're willing to share along those lines?
Lots of all that. I think one of the things that we used a lot inside Rackspace was the Strength Finders from Gallup, and when that was originally introduced, like a lot of things, I wasn't a big fan of it. I felt like, oh look, it's like another Myers-Briggs. I'm not sure it really serves a purpose. And what I found, and what we found as an organization, was one, it allowed you to find, have a vocabulary for what you really loved and could be great at. And it empowered everybody to say, hey, I am really great at these things, and I am really awful at these things, and I need to find teammates, partners, coworkers who are good at the things I am bad at, so I can focus on what makes me great. And that is an idea that has really kind of shaped my career, but I didn't discover it at the very beginning of my life. I got a computer when I was young. I went to computer camp. I really loved programming, but I didn't think that was a career, if you could imagine. Like when I went to school, I thought I was going to be a chemist. I just kept turning away from something that I obviously have a talent for, and I have I have a deep passion for, and I have continued to stay engaged, because it didn't seem like it fit into what I thought where I should head. And whenever I talk to kids today, I'm sort of like, look, there isn't a big book of jobs out there where you have to be a veterinarian. My son watches a guy named Dan TDM, who was a college student who was into Minecraft and now does world tours. The world is a crazy place now. If you get deep enough into something, you can be almost anything. And I think that's never been more true than it is now. And it's something that I sometimes wonder, if I had really doubled down on those things earlier, where would things have been different for me, or where would I have gotten? I mean, I have had an amazing life, but you probably noticed a trend among people who do things like this, that I'm still just very driven, and that's not something that gets turned off because of an external measure of success. I'm just wired that way, that I want to do stuff. And when you talk about kind of work-life balance, or I sort of put everything on pause to do Rackspace. I put my kind of personal life on pause. I put my health on pause. The month after we raised the money, my dad was 56. He had a heart attack and died. And his dad died of a heart attack at 56. And to be honest with you, when we started, I thought, well, first of all, I was young. I thought 56 sounds old. And I thought, okay, I'm going to die at 56. I better make the most of this thing. And so I just put my head down and did as much work as I possibly could. And, after 10 years of that, I woke up 350 pounds. I went to my doctor, and he sort of said, look, you're going to have a heart attack, and when it happens, you're not going to get a warning. You're going to die. And you should do something about it. I've talked to you about it for a long time. And that's just the facts. This is one of the things I like about my GP, is he does not beat around the bush. When I first met him, he's like, look, I hope you die of like old age, like we'll work backwards from that. But you're going to die, so let's make it a good one. And at that point, I was married. I'd had my first child, and I started to think like, wow, 56 isn't that old. Is this really what I want to do? And I think in the back of my head, I had this idea that, I drew a genetic short stick and I was doomed. And so he sort of said, hey, look, come back in a month, in a couple months, we'll get you on some new drugs. We'll try and find a plan. And I decided to sort of reboot my life. I had been doing some yoga. I did a lot of yoga. I started doing CrossFit. I changed my diet radically. And when I came back, he goes, hey, your numbers are all doing way better. Those drugs are really working. And I was like, I don't think it's the drugs. I think it's I made some other changes. And he goes, oh, well, that's great. I go, well, so how long do I have to do this? And he goes, well, how long do you want to live? And so I was like, I don't know, a long time. He goes, well, then you better do it a long time. And so I think it was one of those lessons that I got lucky. I very clearly was pointing my plane dead into the ground, expecting to crash. And fortunately, I woke up and realized it wasn't bad genetics that was getting me in trouble. It was the things I put in my mouth and the fact that I sat too much that was getting me in trouble. And that if I want to see, my dad died a month into one of the biggest events in my life. And I want to see what my children do. And to do that, I got to be here. And so, I think a lot of times when we talk about work-life balance, we focus on like there's this narrow band where it's perfectly in balance. And I don't think that's realistic. That would be saying like, oh, well, I want exactly the same amount of potatoes on my plate as I do steak. It isn't, that's not to me what balance means for work life. For me, it means what is sustainable. And that means that I need challenging work. It's why I'm in a startup again. It means that I need to do things for my health, which is why I still do yoga and CrossFit. But also it means that, hey, I don't work every night after I get home. I spend time with my family. If my son has a recital, I go, hey, I'm going to this recital. I will do stuff later to make up for whatever I miss. But that I'm not putting his whole life on pause while I do something that wouldn't be sustainable for me. And so I think this word of balance leads you or at least for me, would lead me to the wrong conclusion that I need to do things equally. That's totally not true. Sometimes I need to pay way more attention to my family than I do my business. And other times, frankly, I've had meetings with my family where I say, look, for the next week, we have a big thing to do. I have got crunch time, but that's not forever. This is the box. And so it's kind of having that sense of, can I do this and keep doing it, that I didn't really have an understanding of when I was younger. I just put it all out there and hoped it worked. And I got to be unbelievably lucky to find an idea at the right time with the right team and make internet history. I mean, it boggles my mind that I even got to be there, let alone to be a founder.
Yeah, no, that's I appreciate your transparency, and I agree with you. The idea of work-life balance, and most people usually do push back on it because it's not a real concept. Like you said, we have these seasons of time and these trade-offs that we have to understand. But I do appreciate you sharing your story around that. It's a big part of things. And then you said you want to be around to see your kids, but obviously if you're not investing in them and time with them, they may not want you to be around to see them. not dead, but I'm saying they won't care if you're at the event or not.
Yeah, and some of that has been funny because my kids know me in a different era in my life, right? There was an era in Rackspace where I slept at the office. I took 24-hour shifts. I suffered. And now that isn't I don't structure my life that way, partially because I realized some of the times I was doing that out of sheer stupidity. I was just working dumber. And unfortunately I still see internet startups kind of celebrate that kind of bravado in a way that doesn't necessarily mean better results. But I want to make sure that my kids also know that when you find something that you're passionate about, you have to put effort in for it to be successful. And that, I think, is something that is, they hear my struggles at the dinner table when we don't, get done for a customer, or we're close on a bid, or there's a complicated rollout. Like they get exposed to the kind of challenges of being in a thing you're building. When I was growing up, my mom ran her own catering company, and my dad ran his own private law practice. And so I actually never heard stories about their bosses or their managers. I didn't really know what that was like growing up. And I realized that it shaped my thinking about what I would do, because I don't really have bosses or managers. I've just got to figure it out. And I guess the studies say that my kids will be in a somewhat similar boat. The entrepreneurs make entrepreneurs.
That's very interesting. It kind of plays along the people don't do what they hear, they do what they see, and that's true of our kids. So no, that's really good. And so you're talking about this, and this is an important part I want to hear and understand. Talk a little bit about what you're up to these days. I know you're CTO of Brokerage Engine, and tell me a little bit about what got you into that, and kind of what you guys are trying to accomplish there.
So I didn't realize this originally, but over time I've come to appreciate that I have an unusual specialty. And that is that I am a sucker for very, very boring systems. I like complicated things, lots of details, but that are typically considered very boring. So now the internet is cool, but like I said, the hosting part of it was plumbing. I helped architect the systems that figured out where all the servers went and who owned them and how they got configured and delivered, and made sure all those details were right. And I think, my degree is in economics, so I tend to think about valuing human capital, that people should do jobs people are good at and leave computers to do the boring part. And so I like focusing in that area. After I left Rackspace, I worked on a system called Trucking Office that was a back office system for small independent trucking companies. And it's again a case where you have like all these moving pieces of freight and drivers and equipment that you have to keep track of and lined up and accounted for and paid out. And it's not sexy, which I've learned the advantage of that is that I'm not competing against 20-year-olds in skinny jeans who will work all night. I'm competing against terrible spreadsheets, such terrible spreadsheets. And so, I've learned this sort of like framework of I like building these systems, but I've got to have, for Rackspace, I was building a system I needed. We were already doing web development and we needed hosting, so I was building it for me. When we did Trucking Office, one of my partners was the actual trucker, and so I could use him as my surrogate of this is the problem you're solving, and then kind of dive into it. And now at Brokerage Engine, I've kind of repeated that. I partnered with really experienced real estate people who kind of brought the problem to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, there are so many moving pieces in it, and there's like I think we go all the way to Algebra 2. This is like such my jam when you're talking about like, oh my gosh, this sales commission, and they have a different modification, and based on these weird situations, you've got to prorate all this stuff. I'm like, I'm sure, like, I know it sounds crazy that anybody could love that much math that's at this like nitty gritty, but this results in somebody getting paid, and they that number better be right, and if you mess it up, they will tell you right away. And so it's a very satisfying high wire act to build a system for brokerages to make them so that they can know how they're really doing. How do they do better service to their customers because they're not spending all this time in the back office.
Yep. Yeah, I wish you would have been around. The company that we grew to $1 billion was largely a brokerage related and sales commission. So that would have been very, very helpful. It's funny, like as a person who, spent so much time in the like provisioning of the product, originally I hated sales people because I'm like, oh my gosh, you're always coming up with these weird things that make no sense, and I got to figure out how to track and allocate them. And then as
as I've grown in the business, I love salespeople because revenue will fix any problem you have. If you get more revenue, a problem will be solved. And so now I kind of celebrate their insanity of, hey, whatever it takes to get it closed, I will account for it. I am on your team. And I really thought that the sales commission stuff would have been solved, but it turns out most of the time when engineers pick up this kind of problem, they want it like a military plate. They want everything to fit in neat little boxes and to be organized and not touch. And I kind of view it as more like a food journal. I don't care if you eat Twinkies all day. I just want to know how many you ate, so at the end of the year we can talk about it.
So another question I have, kind of coming full circle. You joked about consultants at the beginning, and that's kind of where you guys started. People that know me know I'm pretty cynical about consultants and coaches, and it's the very reason I became one after we sold our company. And so now that you're kind of on the other side, you're now advising startups, kind of private equity side of things and stuff like that. How do you think about coaches and consultants today?
So one, I think that the thing that I hated about consultants as being inside a company, I love about outside, which is they can say what your employees are already saying, but leadership will often listen to them. And I used to hate that because I would be like, I just said that. Why are you paying this guy $200 an hour to say what I just said? And now I just know, hey, look, you're going to spend a lot of money, and he's going to tell you something you already know, but you're going to have to look at that in the face, and you won't be able to hide from it. So there is a value to that, because I think sometimes it's not that they didn't hear the employees, it's that they're hoping that they're not right. And also, a lot of times people think that a coach or a consultant is going to solve everything. It's going to come in and wave a wand and everything's going to get better. And I think that when you have that expectation, you're just bound to be disappointed in the outcome. And instead, what you really should be looking for is, hey, look, get a different perspective. Get somebody who's not as connected or emotionally tied up in the situation, and use that as a data point to kind of head check what you're doing. And if you use them that way, they can be incredibly helpful. I mean, it can jog loose that thing that you think, well, maybe this is right. And now when you look at it that way, okay, I can see where my idea fits, but you can't just outsource your future to them. And I think that when I was younger, I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And that is, I wrestled in high school, and I think about the coach wasn't there to win the match. He was there to get me in shape to win the match, but it was my job to win. And I think that when you don't have that attitude, you're going to have a bad time.
Yep. No, exactly. That's very true. You've got kids. When you talk to them about leadership, what is some advice or a guidance you would give them about what leadership means, the importance of it, or lack thereof, or whatever it is?
Wow, what does leadership mean? One of the things that I think is hard for kids today. I mean, look, we had bullies and annoying people when I was a kid. With every generation had them, but the modern era has weaponized them. They have given them a platform and visuals and a studio budget. I mean, I kind of despair at how hard it must be to be a kid when you can watch a live feed of other people having a good time that you weren't included in. So, but I think when I talk to my kids about that stuff, I try to remind them that today is preparing them for the future, that they're doing work today to get ready for where they go, and that today may be bad, but it's really about where you're going and what's going to happen, and that you should enjoy the things you enjoy. Somebody said this, don't yuck someone else's yum, and I try to remind my kids that, hey, look, just because you don't like it doesn't mean you have to make somebody feel bad about it. The same way you don't want them to make you feel bad because you're into something, and that you should really enjoy those things. Not ironically, but because you like them, and get as deep as you want, because the future is all about getting deep in things. It's not about breadth, although you don't have to figure out what your deep, your permanent deep thing is right now. So like we kind of go into this thing where my son will find something interesting and we'll read a bunch about it, or we'll watch a bunch of shows, or we'll look on YouTube, and then he'll be like, okay, now I'm wandering off. And it's like, okay, great. Let's go see, find the next thing. And I think, but getting that idea that, hey, if you're into something, get deeper. And then I know as he grows up, that window of depth will elongate, and that's where he'll find the thing that really makes him him. And I think that today everybody feels more pressure than ever to be like somebody else. And once you fall into that trap, you're never going to win.
Wow, I really appreciated Dirk's approach to hiring. One of the most difficult things in scaling and growing a business is hiring and promoting people. I liked how he talked about you can't be too focused on data or gut instinct. They're both important. What a unique and great perspective to think about. Think about in your business. Are you looking to hire someone when you're hiring them or promoting them to do the job now? Or do you think about it in a longer term aspect? What is needed for that position to grow, and does this individual have what it takes to grow into that position? And how do you go about finding what excites somebody, what they're passionate about, what truly tunes up their heart and gets them excited? How do you go about doing that in your interviewing and in your promoting? I also wish that we had this interview when we talked to Dirk before we did our recent work-life balance podcast. And if you've not had a chance to listen to that, I strongly encourage you to do that. From the beginning of time, we've asked CEOs and other executives how they think about this issue of work-life balance. Now, some say that work-life balance isn't a real thing, and that's actually part of the podcast. Either way, Dirk provided some incredible perspective that he got from when he lost his dad at the young age of 56 years old and how that changed him. He's real about how he approaches this issue of work and life and the balance that sometimes is not able to have happen. It's all about sustainability. Will it work long term? It's a beautiful way to frame it and think about it. I also really enjoyed that he tells his family when he needs to go heads down before he has to go heads down. We all have to do that in our careers and have seasons of time where our attention needs to be focused in other places. But he acknowledges that it's not going to be fun, that it's going to be a hard season of time, but he understands and communicates early that is a season of time and not something that's going to go on forever and ever. So what did you think about today's podcast? We'd love to hear back from you. This podcast is built on the responses that we get from you. We seek out individuals that can give real and raw perspective on the questions that you have. So please take a moment and give us your feedback. Thank you again for listening to the For You Leaders podcast.